Comenzamos.
Go ahead. Good afternoon, everybody. I am very pleased to open this meeting with Michael Fullan. Today, we are here because of a very important conversation. Michael Fullan is a world leader in this movement, new pedagogies in deep learning. It brings together education centers from over 10 countries. And we have some experience here in Uruguay with over 700 education centers in primary school, secondary school, technical schools, university, private and public centers. Michael Fullan is an old friend of ours. He visited Uruguay very frequently, face to face. This today is a remote meeting, a virtual meeting. At the same time, we have a very dear group of principals from different education centers who are very active, very enthusiastic, participating in these new pedagogies for deep learning. Our purpose is to get together with Michael to talk about his recent paper called The Right Drivers. And we want to talk about it from the Uruguayan perspective, being able to exchange with him in this very private space as well as open space. And we will be able to share what we think about these drivers from the Uruguayan perspective. For us, for me in particular, I feel so proud to lead the global network of learning in Uruguay, working alongside you, the principals, the teachers, Michael Fullan and his team at the level of the global partnership. So we want to exchange on this paper the structure, the way in which we will proceed will be explained shortly so that you know how to go ahead. First of all, we'll listen to Michael for about 10 minutes. He will talk about the contents in his proposal. After that, 4 Uruguayan principals will present his or her point of view on each pair of drivers. Each principal will make a brief presentation, about 5 minutes, and after each of the interventions, Michael will answer or provide his insight. So after the 4 short blocks, we'll have an open space for Q&A from principals who are present in this Zoom meeting, as well as from colleagues and friends from all around the country and maybe from foreign countries who have joined the YouTube transmission. So I now give the floor to Michael Fullan, and I ask you to share the presentation that he has for us. Mr. Fullan, you have the floor.
Okay, hola everyone. It's very nice to be with you, especially for this focused discussion on the new addition to our thinking. And so I have about just 10 minutes. I want to set this up carefully. We have, you, as Claudia mentioned, know deep learning very well because you were one of the pioneers of our 7 or 8 countries that started 6 years ago. And this has progressed very well and very strongly. There was one thing missing, I think, when I came to want to see it develop fully, which was an analysis of the system that surrounded our NPDL initiative itself. And so I wrote this paper. And can you put my slides up one slide at a time? I don't see a slide. Should I be seeing my slide here?
La estamos viendo dentro del Zoom.
Okay, so again, so how do I see my slides so I know what you're looking at? Okay, so let's go from there. Then we'll let me when I say I'll talk to the slide and I'll say it each time to move it. So I'm sorry I don't have the Spanish cover, but Sibel, as you know, translated the right drivers for whole system success in a Spanish complete version. So it's fantastic that that's available. And if you go to the next slide from that one, and this is how I want to have you understand why I did this report. It's not a blueprint or strategy for implementation of the ideas in it. It's an invitation. I use the word crowdsource, but it's really an invitation to you, and I'm glad you set this conference up this way, to implement NPDL more strongly because of the ideas in this Right Drivers report. And it will require leadership at all levels. And so I am saying as a basic assumption that you have you've gone a long way with the 700 schools and the elements of implementation of NPDL, but you I don't think can go all the way without the framework that I'm providing in the 4 drivers. And I'm also pleased to say that there's a widespread interest in having these drivers implemented in addition to NPDL or with NPDL. I just spent 3 hours a few minutes ago with, this morning with LAC, which is Latin America, Central America Initiative, and the group called KIX, KIX, which is Knowledge Exchange. And these were Honduras, Jamaica, other countries, and they were very much wanting to implement the drivers. So I'm saying it this way, to say that this is, I think, of widespread interest. So let's delve into it. Go to the next slide. First we say the pandemic has, I use the English word, discombobulated, which just means the system is turned upside down. But there's a lot of bad things about COVID-19, as you know, as you live. But there's also an opportunity to change the system because it's been so much kind of cleared away a lot of the other ideas, so that there's an opportunity to move in here. I consider it ideal for you to take NPDL framework and the drivers, combine them, and do a much more deep implementation. And the ideas with the other countries that in Latin America, in Central America, is that there's going to be a wider interest. And because we think of you as a leader, having a lot of expertise, we think you will be able to help others, as well as when you help others, you always learn yourself. So let's go to the next slide. We get a bit closer to the framework. We think there's obvious reasons to change. I've written about these elsewhere. They can be boiled down to 2 big reasons why we can say that the system wasn't working very well even before COVID. So now we have the opportunity to pay more attention to that. The 2 big reasons I could put these in 2 clusters. One is about climate and deterioration of climate, and the other is about the social aspects of society, mental health, social trust, inequality. So all of those are going in a negative direction. So we have a physical problem, the climate collapse, and we have a social problem, the relationships between people and the growing inequality. So those are the reasons, that's the context. let's move closer now to the drivers. Next slide. This is our motto that we got from working together in our in setting up the NPDL in the first place. Engage the world, change the world. And so one more slide before we get to the drivers. So next slide. I think very much, I see it this way, there's a new purpose for public education. We had already wanted that prior to this development, but when I did the driver's paper, it became very clear that it's to develop a purpose in education where students and others can find a purpose for why they should learn things. And that purpose has to do with engaging the world, changing the world. That purpose has to be educated in a way that that all the graduates are more able not only to live in a complex society, but help change the complex society for better, how to make improvements. So now you understand, I know you understand the 6 C's, the 4 elements of the learning design, the support system at the school, the regional and the policy level. And so that's our NPDL model. So let's add now the drivers. Next slide. And the way we're going to do this is I'm going to make a comment on the set, the 8 of them. And then we're going to go to the first one. And I like the design you've made. For each one, I'm going to say a couple of words about it. And then you're going to, principals have been ready to say something back to all of us. And we'll go 1, 2, 3, 4 in that way. So you see in the drivers that there is the right driver is on the left side. It's got those 4 pieces, 4 elements. Well-being as a driver compared to academic, which is not a good driver. Collaboration, social. We'll go to each one slowly because you're going to talk to me, but I just want to talk to the set. The idea is not to eliminate the wrong drivers, but to make the right drivers rise, to be more prominent, and to make the ones that are not the right drivers, I call it in English, I call it dampen them, to make them less prominent. So just to summarize, we've said in the paper, you've seen it, that well-being needs to be the strongest part because just focusing on academic learning is not good enough. That social intelligence or collaboration needs to be strong because just depending on technology is not good enough. That there's new analysis of economics. We see it most prominently implemented right now, right away, with Joe Biden's presidency in the US, which is to invest in development and capacity building, childcare, helping people get jobs and helping people flourish better so that there's a greater financial restructuring of society in a way that will make more people more productive and increase what we call prosperity compared to the old model, which has been actually in practice for the last at least 40 years, which I've called austerity, which means you're always trying to balance the budget and you're not investing in the future enough. And then there's the big problem of systemness or fragmentation. So this will come alive now from you. We're going to go to the next one. And I'm going to mention 2 slides and I'm going to stop and hear from you. So the wrong driver, number 1, academic obsession, I called it. The schooling is too narrow. Learning to pass standardized tests doesn't give people motivation. And even in this research, I quote in the paper that the people who do well academically are also losers because they don't necessarily do well in life. One of the research papers called it the wounded winners. So let's go to the other pair, the right driver now. Next slide. And the right driver is that well-being and learning, which I've given, there's a cluster there, you'll be familiar with them from NPDL. Sense of purpose, identity, belongingness, making a contribution to improve your situation or the world. We've seen those videos, those fantastic videos from Uruguay about those initiatives, a stronger sense of self-efficacy and mastery. So the design you've done now is to have me stop. We just take driver number 1 and we'll hear from you for a few minutes and then you can tell me when to proceed to driver 2. So over to you.
Bueno, si les parece, yo puedo...
All right. I will introduce Verdun Meroni. She's going to refer to the first pair of drivers. Verdun, you have the floor.
Bueno, muchas gracias. La verdad que
Thank
es un
you.
gusto poder
It is
participar de
a
esta
great
conversación
pleasure
con
for me
Michael
to
Fullan.
be
Los
part
saludamos
of this dialogue with
desde el
Mr.
norte
Fullan.
del
Greetings
Uruguay,
to you,
del
Mr.
liceo de Villa
Fullan.
Constitución.
I am from the
Antes
north
que
of
nada,
Uruguay, from Villa
quisiera destacar que
Constitución.
este primer par de
I
impulsores
want to
a
say
mí
that
me
this
impactó
first
mucho cuando me
group of
propusieron
drivers
trabajarlo,
came to me as
porque
an
Fullan
impact.
menciona que es la
Because you, Mr.
esencia
Fullan,
de lo que
say
es la
that the
educación.
essence,
La
this is the
esencia de
essence
hacia
of
dónde tendríamos
education,
que
where
ir.
we
Me parece
are
que es
heading
fundamental
to.
después
This
de
is fundamental.
sobrevivir y atravesar esta
After
pandemia que
having
estamos pasando,
survived
que
the
sin duda
pandemic,
ha cambiado
which has
las bases, va a
changed
cambiar las bases de lo que es la civilización
radically the
occidental.
basis of the
Tenemos
Western
que
civilization.
redefinir lo
I
que es
think
el
we
concepto
need
de
to
educación, lo que es el concepto
redefine
de
the
bienestar en
concept of
educación.
education
Nuestros
and
chicos
well-being
tienen
in
que
education.
aprender,
Our
pero tienen
kids
que aprender
must learn,
aprender a compartir,
but they
aprender a
must
ser, como
learn
decían
to
hace muchos
share,
años,
to be,
el libro de Jacques Delors, ¿verdad?
as
Los
Jacques Delors
estudiantes
said.
exitosos en términos
Successful
académicos
students
no
in
lo son si
academic
no son
terms
exitosos en la
are not
vida, si no pueden
successful if they are not
compartir un
successful in
propósito,
life,
si no
if they
tienen
cannot share a
un
purpose in life,
sentimiento
if
de
they have no
respeto, de
feelings
solidaridad,
of
si no se
respect
sienten
or
integrados a lo que
solidarity,
es su
if they
comunidad.
don't feel
El
they
bienestar hace
belong
que
to
los
their
chicos tengan
communities.
un
Well-being
sentimiento de seguridad en
allows
sí
children
mismo,
to feel
tengan metas,
sure
tengan
of
valores y se sientan
themselves, to
partícipes de
have
algo más grande
goals,
que ellos
to feel
mismos.
that they can
Muchas
engage
veces
in
vemos
something
que
bigger
hay
than
aún
themselves.
hoy, a pesar de que
Even
nuestro
today,
sistema educativo hace
even
tiempo que
though
venimos
our
transitando
education
este
system
camino a través de la red global de
has
aprendizaje,
been paying
vemos que aún
attention
hoy
to these
todavía
facts,
hay personas
even
que
today we
valoran de alguna
find
forma la
people
meritocracia.
who
Pero como
value
bien
the
plantea
academic
Michael
aspect more
en su
than the
artículo,
human
¿verdad? El
aspect.
ideal meritocrático deja
And
a los
the
ganadores
ideal of only academic
arrogantes a
aspects
veces y a los
makes the
perdedores los
winners
deja
very
humillados y heridos.
arrogant
Y una de las
and the
cosas que tenemos
losers
que
very
transmitir a nuestros
distressed.
alumnos es
So
que
we
si
need to
alguien tiene un
convey
don,
one
tiene la
idea
capacidad
to our
de ser
students. If you
inteligente,
have the
de poder hacer
capacity
cosas,
or the
se hace más
gift
rico
of
si ese
being
don se comparte.
intelligent, you will be
Si uno
richer
puede
if you
dar algo de
share
sí
that
a los
wealth
demás.
you have, that
Uno no se
natural wealth.
empobrece
You will not
porque
become
entregue
poorer
algo de su
if you
conocimiento,
give
de su
some
tiempo
part
o
of your
incluso de
knowledge
su
or
dinero a los
if you
demás. Se
donate your
enriquece de
time
esa
or your
forma.
money. You
En estos
become
días que
richer if you
estábamos
do that.
trabajando con el artículo de
These
Michael,
days,
yo también estaba
we've been
leyendo un
working with
libro
your paper,
del
Mr.
filósofo
Fullan,
esloveno
and I also read a
Slavoj
book
Žižek,
by
en el
Slavoj
cual él
Žižek
plantea que en estos
from
momentos el mundo
Slovenia.
está
He
dinamitado,
says that
¿verdad?
the
La
world
COVID-19
is
estremece
under
al mundo, se llama el
dynamite
libro, pandemia.
because of the
Y él
pandemic.
dice que todos nuestros
He
mecanismos
says
de
that
primates
all
altamente
our
evolucionados
primate
han fracasado.
mechanisms have
Nos vemos
failed,
amenazados por la
that we
criatura
feel
más humilde
threatened
de la
by
Tierra.
the most
Unos
humble
estúpidos virus que se
organism
reproducen
in the
ciegamente
world,
y luego
a
mutan.
stupid virus
Y
that
este
can
filósofo nos dice
reproduce
también,
itself
una
and
cosa es
increase in
segura,
number.
la
One
solución
thing
no
I'm
será el
sure of, the
aislamiento, ni la
solution is
construcción de
not
nuevos muros,
isolation
ni
or
posteriores
creating
cuarentenas.
new
Hace
walls for
falta una
protection.
plena
What
solidaridad
we need is
incondicional y una
solidarity,
respuesta coordinada a nivel
unconditional
global, una
solidarity,
nueva
and
forma de lo que antaño se llamó
coherence.
comunismo. Es la
What in the
solidaridad
past
a
was
la cual
called
hacía Michael
communism.
referencia.
This is
Me
the
gustó mucho poder
solidarity that Michael
encontrar en
referred
estos dos
to, and I
pensadores
felt very
que
proud to
admiro,
find
respeto,
coincidences
esta
in these two
coincidencia de
thinkers
posturas.
that I
Así que
admire.
realmente para mí lo
So, to
esencial
me,
en
the
esta
basic
propuesta de los
thing
4
in this
impulsores
proposal
correctos
of the
para
4
cambiar el
right
sistema educativo
drivers
en esta
to change an
oportunidad
education
que nos brinda
system,
la pandemia va
in this
realmente
opportunity
hacia
provided by the
efectivamente lograr
pandemic,
un bienestar, no
is
solo
to
de nuestros
achieve
chicos,
the
sino
well-being
también de
of
nuestros
our
docentes.
kids and
que es
our
una de las cosas que
teachers
también
as
nos
well.
importa mucho.
This
Cómo
is something
mantener
we
la salud
must bear in
mental
mind,
y la
how to
cordura
maintain
durante
them
este tiempo de pandemia en
healthy
el cual hemos estado
and
trabajando en
calm
casa.
during the
Eso ha sido una de las
pandemic
cosas más
when they have
importantes.
to
El
work
valor
from
humano
home.
es lo que más nos
Human
interesa.
values
Muchas
need to be
gracias.
protected. Thank you. That's all I have to share.
Okay, so thank you very much. I think you want me to respond very briefly to each one. And this is, I think what you said was this, when you looked at this first driver, academic overemphasis and the need for well-being to be looked at more, that it made a big impact on you. I'm going to say that you already knew what I was going, some of the things I said, but when I articulated them, when I said them so clearly with evidence, you saw the meaning of them more deeply. And I think that's how I intended the report to be that way. And I think that's the way you looked at it. And that there's lots to do about it. And I just want to say that you mentioned the way you said, at least it was translated this way, is that sometimes the winners are arrogant. They're privileged. They do better. You said it that way. But in the report, actually, I say that the winners, they know academic things, but they don't know life necessarily. So I don't think actually, well, they might be arrogant, but they don't have a reason to be arrogant because they're not fit for life strongly enough without the well-being. They themselves, and that's why the research I cited called them the wounded winners, because they only know one side, the academic side. They don't need all the things we need to know about people, about relationships, about all of those ideas. And so even if we just look at those that do well in the current system, I say that they are not learning enough to have a good life. And there's a lot of evidence to show that. And then the other side of this, we say, is those that are on the poor end of things, when they get better, they will actually, it'll be a win for both groups. That is, the society will develop in a way, and this means the other drivers have to be part of it. It will be a way when the overall society gets stronger, the whole society gets stronger. So that anyway, that thank you very much. I think you got the essence of it, and it actually is hard to talk about one driver without wanting to talk about the other three. But so you drifted a bit into the other ones. But anyway, that's great. So why don't we go to the second driver, second pair, and I'll show two slides, one after the other, and then we'll get someone else. But thank you very much for your comments. They were very specific and very accurate, I thought. So with driver number two. So the first part, I use certain language here. I called it machine intelligence, but it's really, I'm sure, artificial intelligence and all kinds of things on technology. And let's go, go back one slide, keep that. So the machine intelligence, what's interesting there was a very strong analysis in the US with a lot of accurate data that proved what I have on the screen here. In other words, they went back in time and they found that educational progress, that means students graduating from, let's say, high school, was actually stronger than technology for all those first 60 years of the 19th century. But around 1975, 1980, it started to change, and machines then started to get ahead. And my analysis basically says it's not because machines were stronger, it's because education was weaker. Education did not keep up. They did not become strong enough. So I use, then we go to the next slide, finish this driver, right driver number two. It's the social intelligence. I use the word social intelligence mainly because people, when they talk about machines, the artificial intelligence, they use the word intelligence. Social intelligence is the quality of the group. Everything we know about good collaboration is because the group gets smarter. And in our strategy for NPDL, we use the collaboration, leadership for collaboration, all of those things that enable people to get together. We use networks of schools working together. Anytime you get more than one person, more than one group working together to improve something, you are working with social intelligence. And I actually say in this driver that technology has developed stronger because I don't know, it has its own momentum that it makes money, people invest in it, big companies invest in it. So we don't have to worry about technology getting stronger because there's the system invests in it for technological development. But we do have to worry about investing in people. And so what I'm saying in our if we build up collaboration inside the school, collaborative cultures, networks of schools, schools that have learned from each other, your 700 schools, there, a lot of your strategies have been to have leaders get better at helping people work together inside and outside the school in order to accomplish more. And it's working. It should work. It does work. So what I've said basically is let's stop and think now. We don't have to say that technology is all bad, but we do have to say that technology is too strong compared to collaboration, and let's build up collaboration and then use technology in relation to collaboration so that the right driver is social intelligence and technology. In fact, we used to say, still is accurately true, that technology is not a driver, it's an accelerator of learning. It can speed up learning, but in order for the driver has to be the collaboration in order for technology to be used as an accelerator or something that speeds up impact. So I know I'm going to hear from one of you now about that pair of drivers, driver number 2.
Muchas gracias, Michael. Sí, me gustaría darle la palabra ahora
Yes, now I will give the floor
Dani es
to
de
Dani
la Escuela Técnica de
Silveira,
Guión, y bueno, va a conectar este
and
par de
he
profesores
is
al que
going
se
to
hizo
connect
con
this
Fullan,
pair of
y
drivers
la realidad nuestra. Esa es la intención de la conversación.
from our own reality, our own perspective.
Este nuevo artículo de Fullan a la
This new
realidad
paper
de
by Fullan
Adelante.
is going to be interpreted by him. It's my pleasure to share this dialogue, and I thank you for this opportunity to interact with Michael. And there are some traits that are typical of our system. You talk of a hypothesis where machines are overvalued and humans are undervalued. And I was thinking about the national education system and its context here in Uruguay. When we access information, the wrong driver in terms of artificial intelligence, you mention social intelligence is an essential, you say, is an essential part of the new science of learning. There are many centers in Uruguay that are fostering social intelligence through skills. And I would like to share with you some insights that could lead to the future and what we could do in the future. In teacher training courses, when we train to become teachers, we receive academic training in skills related to specific subjects. And we are trained to develop proposals that have to do with specific contents. And then the education ecosystem where we live, those of us who are managers in education or who teach in a classroom, receive signals. These signals guide us or propose contents to us. contents in terms of subject matter. So my question is, or my comment is, your paper talks about issues that cut across the whole curriculum we have in the Uruguayan system. We somehow share values, we distribute knowledge, we have positive feedback that cuts across this curriculum. But I want to take this opportunity to ask you another question, because you have a privileged position, because you know about other countries and about other systems. What can we do so that the right driver that is successful in many parts of the world could be used here in Uruguay? How can we strengthen the right driver in Uruguay so that the political or the sphere or the authorities incorporate this right driver so that we, the teachers, can perform better? In other words, who's going to be accountable so that this right driver is being implemented? What would be the role of principals in fostering right drivers? And talking about technology, what's going to be the role of technology in terms of how will this technology serve the right driver? How can artificial intelligence help social intelligence? How can it serve the development of social intelligence? With Claudia, we were using one word in common. This is a moment that is ubiquitous. We need to be present in many different places at the same time. So in those cases, we need to use technology. That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. And it's very fundamental question. And I would say that, first of all, my intention in describing the two parts of the drivers is that people will read the report, will relate to the ideas, and will start using them, whether they're at the school level, the community level, or the policy level. So it's my invitation for you to take the ideas and start to use them. That's the general way of putting it. The second way to put on this particular driver is that Uruguay has come a long way in the last, I'll say 14 years since I first visited. I think it was at least 14 years ago. But if you know the short history of CIBEL, you will know that when they started with technology. They got one computer for every student, a small, unsophisticated device, but still the technology. And my first invitation, I think it was 2007 or something like that, from Miguel Breckner, the head of CIBEL, president. He asked me to come and assess where the situation was and where you might go next. And I came down with my colleague, Professor Stephen Anderson, and we did assess it. And I think, I guess I will say that Miguel was probably predicting what we might say, because he wanted us to say this. But we basically said the technology is present, but the pedagogy is missing. It's weak. And so you've got all this technology, you have to build up the pedagogy. And to use, and I think I want to say two things. It's not just building up the pedagogy or the learning. And we did say that technology is not the accelerator, that pedagogy is the accelerator, and technology can or sorry, put it another way, pedagogy is the driver. So pedagogy is the most important, and technology then can accelerate it second. So that's one, that turned the strategy around when that report was accepted by you. And then now, after doing it now up to 100 schools and then eventually 700 now, we see in the videos that we get from you, we see one of the ones I saw last was several schools getting together where the students were trying to figure out how to convert rainwater into usable water. And so they had to do learn from teachers, they had to learn from other students, they had to design how to make the water flow and get rid of the bad parts of the water and refine it, all of that. Well, lots of science, lots of working together. And I saw in that, I guess I'll say the democracy of collaboration is the word I want to use, the democracy of collaboration. That students were very articulate with each other, with the teacher. There were the distances between students and teachers was not very evident, but the positive things that were doing that. So I want to answer your question, number one, by saying you have already used this strategy, which I call collaboration or social intelligence, to get as far as you already are with the 700 schools and more. So that part, I'm confirming what you did. Then the next phase is a question of whether, and I think you were hinting that or stating this, is how do we get the policymakers to be more committed to each of the drivers? And there, I mean, my part of it is to do this paper, so I'm putting pressure on the policymakers by the quality of the argument and the number of people who will start to agree with me. When we did this seminar a few hours ago to LAC, LAC, the Latin America and Central America, there were a lot of leaders in the seminar, and they were agreeing with it, and they were starting to make changes and wanting to make changes at the policy level. So finally, I would say about this is you build up the basis of this at the school and the community level more and more. So, and that basis starts to be successful. And at the same time, you push policymakers to do other things. Maybe some of it's political. I don't know the ins and outs of your elections, but what I've done is to say, this is a job for the local school and community. It's a job for the municipality with the schools cooperating. It's a job for CBEL to coordinate a lot of across the whole country. And it's a job for the Ministry of Education, the politicians, to make that contribution. So I've supplied, if you like, some arguments for pushing that development. And that's where we are with it. And I think, you know, that's my purpose, is to give you a better line of argument to make more impact on, in this case, the driver we're talking about. So I think we go to driver 3, is that right? Correct? If we go to, this is about money. And there is a very interesting development. It came out of, to me, I would say it in English, it came out of nowhere. That all of a sudden, I could see 5 or 6 books written by economists, all of them women, just as so happens. Italian, American, some others, they all made the same analysis. I've summarized it in the paper. Whoever's going to talk about this will react to it. But they basically, first of all, as economists, said and proved one main thing, which was from 1975 to the present, the economic system in almost every country in the world has been fixed in favor of the rich, a very small percentage of the rich. Some people say 1%, but let's say 10%. So the rich got richer, 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 richer. And the poor, the distance got more. And they also, the middle class went downward, also resources. So we're just talking economics now. But these 5 or 6 books that I took the findings from, they prove each other. That is, the books are all consistent with each other. And for the first time, everybody knew this was happening, but the first time they provided the argument with a lot of facts, page after page after page. This system is operating around the world, that the money is going upward and the poverty is going downward. That's what's happening. So that's had its terrible consequences. It's one of the reasons why the education has not made much progress on equality. U.S. has put lots of money into equity and equality. It's made no progress in 40 years. So that's the wrong driver. Let's switch then to the right driver, the next slide. And the right driver is now, and I want to emphasize the economist argument here. For the first time, the economists now, in their analysis, they are saying that to go into deficit is not necessarily a bad thing if you're spending money on developing the capacity of the system to have better education, better childcare, that of course, it's related to justice, social justice, but it's also related to prosperity, whether or not the system gets better. And so there has, I don't know whether you read much of the economic analysis around the world, but right now among the economists, and the most prominent example in practice is the United States, Joe Biden. At least one of these authors is an advisor to him, Heather Bushy, who is one of the economists I'm talking about. And they have just put trillions of dollars into, you can read about it day after day, it's getting bigger and bigger, it seems. And I don't mean that you spend money well, I guess some of the books put it this way, they don't have to have the money to spend it. They just have to create a bigger deficit if they're in this case, in charge of the economy. But the point about it is, if you don't invest money, you don't increase equality, and you don't increase prosperity, which I'm talking about as financial prosperity for the country. And that this realization now, especially if you combine it with drivers number 1 and number 2. So we have number 1, number 2, and the money surrounding it to promote number 1 and number 2. You get a triple benefit. And that triple benefit is that the increased investment leads to greater education, leads to greater prosperity. And that if I stick with the economic argument, is that the economic investment produces strong social benefits for the society. It increases it. And then, and that's, at least that's the analysis. And that's what the US are doing right now to change. They're literally trying to change their past 40 years. Whether they'll be successful, that's another matter. But the other good news that this is the kind of discussion, if you check and talk about the economic press, books or articles or whatever, this is all of the discussion now. Invest in capacity. Well, two things. Invest in helping those that are suffering the most obvious impact of COVID. So there's a crisis investment. But then there's a future investment, which is to build up the capacity so that the whole society gets more prosperous. And when you team up the drivers, driver 1 plus driver 2 plus driver 3 in this case, you can get amazing benefits in the next 5 years. And so whatever, I'd be very interested in how you reacted to this. And I guess we'll hear from one of you right now.
Bueno, muchas gracias, Michael. Sí.
Thank you, Michael.
La verdad que cuando leí el paper de
When I read your paper,
me impactó, pero ahora
I was shocked by this section. It's an impact. It talks to me. Fullan discusses economics and politics in a very natural and different way. It's amazing. It's so interesting. We discussed this a lot deeply with a team, and the challenge is for Juan Pedro Mir, who's a member of our team of principals. He's going to share his views on this pair of drivers: investment, equality investments vis-a-vis austerity. At a point in time where this is a burning issue in Uruguay. And we are facing this challenge. Juan Pedro, you have the floor. Good afternoon. It's a great honor, Mr. Fullan, to share this activity with you. As we were reading your paper, and this part in particular, I had two ideas. First one, Uruguay has a long-standing tradition of investing in education to build up society. Especially in the early 20th century, Uruguay was a pioneer to make education universal at the primary, secondary, and technical levels. We talked about the rich country when we had fat cows, as we say in Uruguay. Up until 1950, we were a rich country due to cattle breeding, and education was part of social policies at the time. So, looking into the future, we feel that there is a need to invest in education. But this brings me to another issue. We have a demographic problem in Uruguay. We have invested a lot of money in social policy. 20% of our GDP is for social policies. The problem is how to distribute this in this future generation. Children are a very scanty good in this country. We don't have many kids, which poses a paradox. Because you may say that with less children, you can look after them so much better, but many of them are poor. So the greatest challenge, alongside investing in education for children, is to invest in the needs in social investment. And finally, we have a state that has developed investment in education, health, and social security in a separate way. However, we can articulate all these activities. Uruguay has to spend more, but then this spending in education, spending in health, spending in social matters must be better articulated. That's a challenge. So my question is, how do you envisage a small country such as Uruguay with a tremendous potential to move forward towards an articulation of education, health, and social policies? That's my question. Thank you.
That's not a very small question, if I can put it that way. And I don't have a magic wand to take 300 countries in the global, whatever the number, and say this should happen here, here, and there. I want to go back to the main purpose. I wanted to make this argument across all drivers as specific and as convincing and as clear as possible, so those reading it could get the message and start to do something about it. That's the main help from this. So then when we apply it to you, I think it should cause the debate, and you've already, in a sense, in your own mind, started to think about some of it. The debate is really something like Uruguay invested in their future and in education and in social development in the 1900s, whatever. And what is the question is, what is the modern day 2021, 2022 version of recapturing some of that spirit? I think it's we've done it before. Now, what's the new version in 2021 to be able to do that? And so I think that that's one part. It's not only investing in children, it's investing in the adults who work with children. So teachers, so that it's investing in the collaboration between health workers and teaching workers to do that. It's spending less energy on narrow academics, because the academic obsession driver one costs money. And a lot of that money is wasted because it's producing a wrong driver. So I'm talking about stirring the pot, if you like, and stirring the thinking. And therefore I want people, and it could be other outsiders from the country other than me too, to really say, all right, if this is our agenda, how does this fit with that, and how can we do that? So I think then rethinking the purpose of education so that the well-being developmental side is stronger. This means saving money on future costs, because if people are undereducated, they cost more in society because they get sicker, they're not as productive. All of those things have financial consequences. So I'm looking then to say, how do you take, we just have driver three, how do you take the first three drivers and have them interact in a way? And maybe I still like the notion of the country saying, how do we recapture our early spirit, our pioneering spirit, when we tried to become more educated, and we are fairly successful in that in its own right. But now what's the new phase of this? What's the 2021 version of what we tried in 1921 or whenever the period was we're talking about? What's the new version look like compared to the old version? I would say that might be a promising line of thinking. Shall we go then? Thanks very much for the question. Great question. That's
Gracias.
a huge one. Thank you.
Gracias.
So shall we go to number 4?
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to number 4, the pair of slides. We'll start with the wrong driver as usual. So I called it fragmentation. It was actually one of the drivers I wrote about 10 years ago, with a lot of the either ad hoc assessment initiatives, too many pieces and the wrong use of assessment. And I don't think your country compared to others has not been so bad on this. That is to say, you don't have I don't think you have so much preoccupation with the wrong kind of testing. I just think that CEBAL and NPDL has been a coherence maker for you for the last 10 years, 14 years. So CEBAL representing and working in cooperation with schools, the 700 schools. This has been an anti-fragmentation strategy. This has been a coherence maker. And that's why you have done so well at NPDL, I think, in that respect. If we could just notch ahead to the next slide, which will get to the right driver. This is the one about systemness. And this is really kind of more abstract, I would say, than the other 3 drivers. We're talking about the whole system. How do we think about it? But I do think the best way for me to say it is that people and I usually think, to simplify things, that there are 3 levels of the system. One level is the local school and community. The second level is the municipality or community jurisdiction, which has multiple schools. And the third level is the policy level at the state level. And this driver says, can we get more people at each of those levels independently, and sometimes in partnership across levels, to pay attention on developing the first three drivers? If you develop the first 3 drivers, you're working on systemness, because they create a better system. And And another thing that, we say about systemness is, even though it's a big word, it's about the whole thing. Systemness does not mean it's the people at the top. They're not the system. The people everywhere are the system. They make up the system. The system is just a label. So I don't want to think of the system as the politicians, although they're part of it. I want to think of the system as the local communities and the combination of things. And the simplest way for me to say it then is to different people, wherever you are, in whatever combination, you're working very hard to foster and develop drivers 1, 2, and 3. And if you do that, you will achieve greater systemness. So I guess we have one more input here from you.
Gracias, Michael.
Thank you, Michael. For this last pair of drivers, I'll give the floor to Silvia Umpierrez, who's the director of a teacher training center, part of Global Network. And she has her perspective, and she's been thinking about this last pair of drivers. Silvia, good afternoon. Special greetings to Mr. Fullan. Very good ideas have been shared by all the colleagues. I'm from the province of San Jose, the Teacher Training Center. We've been part of the network for the last 7 years, and we have been able to really work over hopelessness. We were able to deal with hopelessness. I've read the document and I focus on systemness. The systemness driver is very important for me. If you have a good syllabus, you can train teachers well. If you have systemness, you can work well. We have a plan for training teachers that was created in 2008. That 2008 plan included something similar to systemness, because it included fragmentation as something negative. It criticized existing plans at the time that were fragmented, and it proposed bringing them together under one single plan. And they used the word fragmentation. And they talked about inequality in the distribution of resources in different sectors of the system. So if we turn over the wrong drivers and look at them from a different perspective, they will not disappear, but they will act in synergy with the right drivers. How? Let me explain. Fragmentation of plans should not be the answer. We are thinking of a new plan, so we don't want to align ourselves under one single plan. We may have more than one plan, but we need to be consistent. The plans need to be consistent. Consistent with what? The new purpose in public education. That is the consistency we are looking for. That is the coherence we are looking for. In terms of inequality in the budgets, sometimes inequality is equity. At that time, in 2008, we were allocating resources to increase the well-being of students and teachers. It created teacher training centers in rural areas, to provide scholarships to students. That budget was thought for the well-being, but unfortunately only the well-being of one part of a system. So sometimes inequality is not a disadvantage. Apparently it is, but it is not. If we turn it around, it can be important. My question to Michael, do you agree with the fact that the curriculum should focus on purpose? When you finish your document, you say, I'm talking about systemness, and systemness summarizes the whole of the other drivers. So maybe having one whole curriculum or syllabus could help us feel that we are all part of the same system and that we can all contribute to one single thing that is whole. Thank you.
Okay, well, the great analysis, I think, you did. And so I want to say two things. So one is just to, I guess I'll say, provide a caution or a goal in terms of some key words you used. You used three words: coherence, consistency, and new purpose. And so I agree with those. And here's where I want to define the system a little more carefully by saying sometimes when people have a policy document and they try to make it consistent, we call it alignment. They align this so with that and something else so that it all fits together. But my use of the word coherence, if we go to that, is that coherence is what's in the minds of people, not what's aligned on paper. So you create a system, and the strategy to make the system coherent is to enable people to interact so they come to a common agreement or a coherent agreement. And so it's very easy sometimes for policymakers to make the mistake of aligning things and calling it coherence when people who are using it don't feel that's so coherent. So it's just really a way of going back to your basis and saying the way to get consistency is to have good, and coherence is to have good documents, and then to have people interact when they're using it so they come to a clear understanding of what those things mean in practice. That's really the essence of it. And then in terms of I don't think I'm necessarily talking about a single solution. I can see differences of emphasis here and there, but I think what is the single focus for me is the sense of purpose. And the sense of purpose is to have an education system where everyone learns to more effective on the global competencies. I mean, they may learn it by doing this different things, but the six competencies they end up with, they are skilled and understanding about those. And so that what we have to do is make the purpose more clear. And I think in my driver's paper that when people read it, they say to me, this is clear now in a way it wasn't so clear before. I agree with this, and I think I agreed before, but I never had the language to think about it this way so carefully. So I think what I hope we will do then with this is that this very document will contribute to thinking and discussion and action and interaction that will cause people to have what we call a shared depth of understanding about the nature of the work. And it sounds like the work that you did, Sylvia, in your teacher preparation institution was actually to work more and more in consistency. And you wouldn't have done it just within the institution. You would have done it in partnership with communities that were using the teachers or employing the teachers. So I think anyway, that's the kind of analysis that I would appreciate. And this whole thing, this is my last point, I guess I want to say, this whole set of things is at a level of complexity that is not simple. I mean, this is like very complicated set of works. And what I've done, I hope, is make it more understandable so that you could work on refining what these things mean in practice for you. And that this is a big task, but I really say that it's a necessary one because society has been losing ground for half a century, losing ground in a dangerous way. And education can be a major possibility of reversing that trend of loss. Thank you again, Sylvia.
Gracias, Michael, por tus palabras.
Thank you, Michael. We now will open the floor to directors, principals, participants to ask questions. We already have 2 questions. Jacqueline Pera, principal, who's going to pose a question. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. A pleasure for me to be here with you. After reading your paper on the right drivers, it goes from 2011 to 2021. In 2011 and 2021, that's a period I've been working as a teacher trainer. I went through different stages, worked with different people, and at this time of uncertainty, where we're looking for a hybrid model to reinvent ourselves, we were trained to teach face-to-face, and now we face new challenges. We have many questions, many doubts, but what works best is collaborative work, working with other teachers, working with community teachers, and working as we are doing now with teachers from all over the country. My question is, how can we create the necessary conditions to bolster learning and making our links more humane through remote systems and machines like Zoom, for example?
Okay, so a quick answer is our team is has been working on advice to schools and other educators about how to handle coming out of the pandemic. What are the this technologies used a lot more? What are the issues? And so we have written quite a good paper, a group of us, the 4 of us, about, we published it 3 weeks ago. It's called Lift and Loss, L-I-F-T, and Loss, L-O-S-S, where there are 10 tips for doing what you just asked to be done. What are the guidelines for collaborating to come out of COVID in a way that's maximizes the lift, we call it, and doesn't focus on negative things about how do we make up for loss of learning. And that paper, Claudia, I think we have, you have a copy of it, but we're hoping that you will translate it into Spanish. It's short and it's got 10 tips for how to do this. So I have to say that this 10 tips paper and the NPDL and the 4 drivers are all compatible. They all work in the same direction. So take your thinking from NPDL, add your thinking from the 4 drivers, look at our lift and loss paper, and you will have your answers, I think, at least the directional ones. You've got already the right questions. You've got the right questions.
Muchas gracias, Michael. Sí, efectivamente tenemos recibimos ese paper.
Yes, we have received this document
Vamos a
and we'll make it available. We receive material from you, we translate the material, and then we share it with the community.
Exactly.
We are already using it in different activities, workshops of a global network. we can receive one more question, and I would like to invite Angélica Borba for the final question. Good afternoon. Thank you for this opportunity. I was very honored to share this activity with you. After reading your paper on the right drivers, you refer to systemness as a meta controller driver that interacts with the other three drivers to generate change. You say that it would be ideal for the three levels of the system independently or together act to achieve the change that we hope to achieve. I would like to ask you the following. Given that you know about Uruguayan education system, that you know about our schools, what strategies could we, the principals, use to achieve connectivity with other levels of education and at the same time preserving a certain autonomy so that we can adapt to the reality of our different institutions?
Good question. And the newest concept that I have is called connected autonomy. So connected autonomy. And it is the answer to your question, because it means on the autonomy side, you have to be your own person or your own group. You have to be, you have to have your own ideas, and you should be able to have a degree of freedom as an autonomous part. But at the same time, the message is you're not allowed to be isolated, because isolation is bad for you, it's bad for the system. So you have to be connected to other peers or whatever in some kind of endeavor that works on the collectivity or the systemness, because when you're connected and you're working that way, and when you're autonomous and you connect, you bring something to the group, you learn something from the group. When you're in the group and you go back to your autonomy or sub-autonomy, you bring back new ideas. So there's a very strong, healthy flow. But to be even more practical, I would say the very question you asked, I would turn it. I'll just give a concrete example of what I'm thinking of. If we want to increase what you and I have just talked about, we might ask CEBAL and there's various partners to have some session on how would we do that. Not me answering it, but you answering it. I've given you the concept. I've given you the stimulation. You've got the idea that certain things could happen, that it would be useful. Why not make it a joint initiative to examine it more closely and come up with a few ideas so that it would be stronger, so that systemness would be stronger. So I'm asking you in that sense is to take my stimulation from the paper, your identification with its meaning to you, and to establish some group that would, in a focused way, say, how could we implement a greater degree of systemness among us? What ideas do we have? Let's take 6 months to meet and talk about it, come up with some ideas, and then put those ideas into practice. That's how I think. And I think it would work, because it means the concepts are good, but the ideas are coming from you and others that you would partner with.
Muchas gracias.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you all. Thank you, Michael. Thank you. My thanks to the principals and over 500 people who have joined this meeting. In closing, I want to share a message. Let's keep on trucking. Let's keep on working together. Mr. Fullan's message was very inspiring, very challenging, I would say even radical. We questioned our realities. We were clear about what to change and how to go about it. We have the local network of learning, and we have to take advantage of it. And I want to invite the whole education community to be part of the network, to be part of our training projects in the different initiatives, so that together we can cross this pandemic and weather this situation. I want to thank Michael. He's always ready to help us. As soon as we write to him, he says, yes, I'll be there, I'll join you. I sent him a message, and less than an hour later, he responded affirmatively. So I invite you all to read this paper and to continue talking with us. Thank you, Michael. Thank you. I thank all the principals, all those who participated, who shared their insights, who were present at this meeting. Hope to meet you again soon.